Welcome to another edition of Great Companies, Great Leaders. I'm Christine Gannon, your host, and I am the founder and CEO of Brightworks Consulting. We are a boutique diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting practice, and we are headquartered in Phoenix, but we serve our clients throughout the country. We are super excited to have with us a tremendous leader in our Phoenix community today, Amber Cordoba. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Christine.
Bet. So a little bit about Amber before we get started. Amber is the Director of Business Education and Consulting Service for Prestamos, CDFI, which is a division of Chicanos por la Causa. She brings over 20 years experience supporting small business from startup through succession. She's an avid entrepreneur, yay, and dedicates herself to helping improve entrepreneurial resource systems so they become more inclusive and effective for everyone. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that today and on our next podcast. So Amber is on a mission to make the world a more equitable and just place, and her primary focus is bringing vital resources into overlooked and underserved small business communities, because she believes that everyone deserves inclusive, equitable access to the resources they need to make their small business thrive, and we agree. She achieves this through her work as the director, and she serves Arizona, California, Southern Nevada, New Mexico, and Texas. In 2021, Prestamos was the top originator by volume for the Paycheck Protection Program, also known as PPP, nationwide, serving 70% minority-owned small businesses. That's a huge feat. In late 2021, she also led efforts to launch Small Business Women's Center in Phoenix and a minority business development agency, Business Center in Las Vegas. So Amber, you are doing amazing things in our community and beyond, but I know that people love to hear about how you got where you are. So can you tell us just a little bit about your journey?
Sure. Thank you. Well, thanks again for having me. I think my journey has been kind of haphazard all over the place, but I think that's really what has led me to be successful in this role. My very first job, I worked part-time at a bird store cleaning cages and saw, from the very basic work that needed to be done all the way up through the management piece. I had a lot of other jobs. I worked in merchant services for quite a while, and I started working as a technical support representative for the small business credit card machines that, we're all so familiar with. I don't know how I got that job, because at that point I couldn't even program a VCR, but I got thrown in and very quickly realized we don't have any process and procedures. There's no standard operating procedures.
Wow.
I was the only one in the department with the one installer, and ended up, developing out the process and procedures, developing a team, really getting the department running solid. And then they said, hey, why don't we put you in applications processing now and just do the same thing?
Yeah.
So long story short, I ended up bopping around to all the different positions. I worked in the IT department for a while, doing server backups. I worked as the sales manager. So really got to see all the different functions of the organization. And then some years later, actually started a merchant services company of my own with a partner. We ran that for about 6 years, had 50 employees at one point.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. When Square became a really popular new technology, we started to see that there were going to be shifts, and we decided to sell our portfolio at that time, and exited the business and that industry. I did bookkeeping. I had my own bookkeeping for a while, and campaign finance. So really, I've seen all of the different aspects of business and how holistically they all work together, and how each function of the business is very important. And I think that really prepared me for this role, to work with small businesses, to advise small businesses. And now I have a team of about 26 that work with businesses all across the Southwest region, as we talked about. And I've always just loved problem solving, crisis management, coming up with new ways of doing things. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity through this organization to bring that experience to really help the communities that need a little support for a thriving business.
It's awesome. I love how you explained your career in terms of the different areas that you got to see and how well-rounded you became in terms of your expertise and your knowledge and leadership skills too, in terms of just seeing different aspects of the business and then becoming a successful entrepreneur. Congratulations. That is huge. And not once, but more than once. So that's awesome. And you're bringing all that today into this role. And so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. So for people that don't know, let's talk a little bit about what CPLC is first and then Prestamos. So what is CPLC? What kind of areas of service do you offer there?
Sure. So Chicanos por la Causa is a 54-year-old nonprofit agency. We focus on economic empowerment and advocacy for predominantly Latino community, but we do serve everybody. We have 5 main pillars of service. We have advocacy, we have early childhood education, we have our health and human services, our real estate development, and then we have economic development, which is where our Prestamos CDFI, and a CDFI is a community development fiduciary institution. We're a mission-driven lender, so we focus on providing both small business support services, but also lending to not individuals, but businesses that need capital in order to grow, expand, purchase equipment, hire new employees, take on a contract. And so we are able to focus on having underwriting guidelines that are more flexible and mission-based versus a traditional bank that you might go to, one of the larger retail banks.
Okay, fantastic. And so when you think about your role, tell us a little bit about what do you do? You know, I have a good understanding, and I know our audience does, in terms of the products and services, but what is a typical client of yours? What are they coming for? What types of things?
We work with a lot of micro businesses, so those that are either solopreneurs or they have, under 9, 10 employees. A lot of them have family ownership or they have family working in the business. They typically start their business out of they're good at something, they're passionate about something, they know that they can make money doing it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have a business degree or a strong, background in business. So a lot of what we do is we teach business fundamentals, business, increasing that business acumen. So whether it's here's what a profit and loss looks like, here's how you can use it to make decisions in your business, to this is QuickBooks, this is how you actually enter your financial transactions, reconcile your accounts to generate those profit and loss statements. We will help people get a website up, understand the different social media platforms and their target market. A lot of businesses don't understand who their target market is or how they can expand that to bring in new products and services. Marketing plans, business planning, or strategic planning. So we do help with the access to capital piece as well and help people through the application process. Even with a mission-driven lender, as easy as you try to make it, it can be really complicated to go through that lending process. Anybody who's applied for a mortgage ever, that it's seemingly unending questions that they ask and documents they ask for. And it can be the same way in business lending. Now, even though we do have our lending component, all of our small business support services, we're lender agnostic. So if somebody does need support with their loan application with another lender, we help them out absolutely. And a lot of times it's, when they're asking for your tax returns, this is why, or what is a personal financial statement? What's the difference between an asset and a liability? What's a debt schedule? All of these things that you need as part of your application, we walk them through, and all of our services are English, Spanish bilingual. So we're able to explain and help translate as well if the lender they're working with doesn't have Spanish speaking associates and they prefer to speak in Spanish, then we can help with that translation process. But really our goals are, how do we make the process as easy, accessible, and equitable as humanly possible so the business owners can get access to the capital that they need to help their business thrive, or get access to the training that they need or the networks they need. So if they're not connected to business advisors or other businesses, entrepreneurship can be a very, very lonely journey.
Yes.
And just having that sense of community and knowing other business owners that you can comfortably chat with, understanding what it's like to have access to an advisory board, or just where do I find a bookkeeper or an accountant or a lawyer, and how much is this going to cost me if I need it? Those types of questions we can help people answer and be more prepared. The best time to have, your CPA or your attorney or your banker is far before you actually need them.
Right.
So we talk a lot about developing those important relationships and having those trades on your side and as part of your team before you're ready to access capital or move into a retail space or a larger space to purchase something. So really that preparation piece and just helping them understand, what are the things that I don't know.
The blind spots, which there are a lot of in entrepreneurship. And I'm reminded as you're talking about that, I don't think anyone really realizes, you do, and I do, and other entrepreneurs do, but unless you've ever started your own company, it's really hard to understand what entrepreneurship is, because I have had a lot of people say to me, you're so fortunate. You have a company of your own and you must have so much freedom. And, it doesn't really bring a lot of freedom. It brings freedom in terms of you're not in a corporate environment potentially, or a different environment, someone else's organization, but there's so much responsibility, and you outlining all those pieces and parts of what you provide in Prestamos is huge. It's absolutely huge. It's like if I had an idea for a bakery, you have all the wraparound services to support me so that I can be successful at that.
Yeah, we work with businesses from that ideation phase all the way to, grow and scale. And you don't know what entrepreneurship takes until you start. And one of the things we always talk with our business owners about is, what does success mean to you? Because it's a little bit different for everybody. And we do get that, well, I want to be my own boss. And I always kind of chuckle to say, well, technically you are your own boss, but you also become dependent on your clients and your employees, and they really become your boss at that point. So instead of having one or two, supervisors, now everybody's your boss and you're responsible for them. And it can be a really heavy weight to carry, knowing if you have staff that you have to make payroll, and if you don't do X, then Y is going to happen. Right. It's a constant need to be reevaluating and shifting. And, that's why having somebody that you can trust to have those conversations with. And even if it's just, we have a women's business center with a big blue couch, and we tell people, just come grab a cup of coffee, plop down. Let's just have a conversation. We don't need to sit across a desk. It doesn't need to be formal. Let us support you and talk to you like the human being that you are, instead of, as a client or a customer.
We're so fortunate to have you in our community. We really are, because I think on the flip side, entrepreneurship is very rewarding, and it's very rewarding when you have the support to be successful. Because I know early on, we established 15 years ago. And I know early on people were like, don't try to wear every hat, just outsource and hire and do all these different things. And it's so important because, for example, let's take our bakery example. I could be the best baker in the world, but not the best salesperson or not the best marketer, right? I don't have all those skills. So I think, Prestamos in the community with your leadership, we're just super fortunate. So I'm really glad that you're here today explaining all that, because I think there's still a lot of people that don't know the gem and like the gold mine we have waiting for people.
Hey, I agree. And thank you. You're obviously a pillar of great leadership in our community, and just thankful for the opportunity to chat with and know you too.
Absolutely. Thank you. So let's talk about our state. How do you feel Arizona measures up in business equity and access to resources compared to other states? Because when I was thinking about your bio, you're other places in the country. So how do you think we rate?
I think we have a plethora of different resources available. There are a lot of technical assistance programs, from the SBDC network to the programming through Local First Arizona. We've got Seed Spot. We've got a lot of programming through the Better Business Bureau, and just tons of other technical assistance. I think the disconnect that we have, and we even have this problem, so I'm not excluding us, is the disconnect in the accessibility. It can be difficult to really tap into and provide the support to the people who need it the most. And I think the biggest challenge stems from those individuals are working in their business. And a lot of times, as you mentioned, they're wearing a lot of hats. It's very difficult for them to step outside of their business, go learn, go get that business advisement, and try to balance that with, I have home responsibilities and family responsibilities in addition to work. So therefore, it can be a real challenge to make that investment in their business and in themselves from a time standpoint. That is just something that's vital. So we really work on trying to make things more accessible. And with the pandemic, obviously now here we are on Zoom, and we're able to be flexible with the times that we meet, with the method of meeting, whether that's in person, over the telephone, virtually. If they come to the center, we come to them. So that's a piece of it. There's still a huge, despite the fact that, Spanish speaking Latinos are the fastest growing market of entrepreneurship, there's still a lack of resources in Spanish that are available. And then I just think the marketing and outreach strategies, if you're head down in your business, focused on your business, you're probably not looking for the resources unless they come to you. And so that's really why it's important to be in the community, working in the community, and the community members spread that with one another. So that's one piece of it, is I think that just that disconnect and accessibility. But there's a ton of service providers. There's a ton of opportunity for capital. It's just really that connection piece.
And I love that that's what you have. So if I am considering a business, or I've started a business, it's open to everyone.
Yeah. All of our services are open to anybody
in the community. So they could step in, make an appointment, and learn about all the different ways they can connect to all the pieces and parts they need to be successful. And to your point about having the couch, they have people they can trust to come and just talk to, versus unloading on maybe their friends or family who might not have the answers. So I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah, and we can't be everything to everybody. So that's why it's important that we have this ecosystem of other providers. And we can say, you know what, based on what you're looking for, you'd be a really good candidate for this program or this particular service provider. And when you finish that, it might be good to come back with us, work on that one-on-one once you've got those fundamentals through, this business accelerator program. So knowing the ecosystem, knowing what other resources are available. And the other really great tie-in with CPLC is that we have a lot of programming. So sometimes people are coming to us when they're in a state of crisis, and that's probably not the best time to work on your business. So we can provide them additional resources, whether it's they need support with housing or utility assistance because they're struggling financially, or we have programming for domestic and intimate partner violence. So if they're experiencing that, we have resources. So there's a lot of resources that we connect people to that's more of a holistic approach, as opposed to just let's talk about entrepreneurship. So that's one of the great values of talking to someone and having a conversation about who they are as a person, is you learn those circumstances that are preventing them from being successful or moving forward. And you can make referrals, make recommendations to say, here, we can help you out in this area while we're trying to work on your business, but it's going to be difficult for you to be successful while you're in this state of crisis. So kind of that more trauma-informed type of care where, we're just being holistic as opposed to, giving you X, Y, and Z advice or information about the business.
Right. Absolutely. It's funny because it reminds me, many years ago, people were talking about homelessness. And they were saying, we just need to give them jobs. And a lot of other people were saying, that doesn't really solve the issue. To your point, like if they're in crisis, they can't really focus on a job and being successful and having their basic needs met, and so it sounds like you've really recognized that and you're providing that wraparound of all the things. And if you don't have it, you have connectivity to it. So really it's kind of a one-stop place.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's awesome. So we're going to come back in 2 other podcasts and talk specifically more about small business and about women and women in business and the Women's Business Center. But I would love to ask you just 2 questions about your leadership. So tell us a little bit about the greatest leadership lesson that you've had to learn, and maybe it was the hard way.
I think I'll talk about this in two ways. My dad has always been an entrepreneur. He does cabinet and countertop installation, and he's had his company as long as I can remember. I remember as a kid, he would, take me in on career day or on the weekend and put those little felt stoppers
Yeah.
in the cabinet. So I learned about entrepreneurship and work ethic from him, and he's always been my business hero. Still to this day, he has this business. He's close to retirement now. But I remember one of my first jobs. I was still in high school. I was working as many hours as I could. I was in 2 college classes. I was trying to graduate as a junior, and I worked my first 2 weeks and got my paycheck. And my paycheck, I was exhausted. That's a lot. That's a
Right.
lot going on for
Yes.
a 16-year-old. And I got my first paycheck and I made less than $100.
Oh
Minimum
my
wage here
gosh.
was far less back then. And I remember going to the payphone at the mall and just calling my dad and telling him, this is way too much to do this. This is barely going to cover gas or go to the
Yeah.
movies. And he told me, this is something that you committed to and you made the decision you want to do it, and you need to commit and put your very best foot forward and do it for a minimum of 6 months. And if then you decide you don't want to do it anymore, you've given a commitment. They've invested in you by putting you through training, by hiring you, by giving you the opportunity, and you need to have that loyalty back. So I have always looked at leadership or employment as this dual role. You're doing for your employer is also doing for you. So that really strong work ethic came from him, from knowing that I made a commitment to something, and that even when it gets tough, you got to stick through. And I think that that's a good leadership example.
Hmm.
On the flip side of that, I think you asked me earlier a little bit about role modeling or other leadership lessons. And the last couple of years have been really challenging, and I've really poured myself into the work because there's so many people that need support. And it got to the point where for my team, I just wasn't accessible to them anymore because I was so busy. And I realized, hey, I'm being a really poor role model here by being so busy that I can't even answer questions or be there for my team when they need them. So really that work, not even work-life balance, but just that balance, learning when to say no, learning how to be there for your team was a
Hmm.
really big lesson for me, because I would hate when someone would start a conversation with, I know you're busy, but I
Yeah.
have to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. And
Yeah.
it gets you, oh man, I've made my team feel like I'm so busy, I can't be there for them. So that was my real hard leadership lesson that I've had.
That's a
But I've
tough
been able
one.
to course correct. So
Good. That's a tough one though, because it's almost like people are starting off with an apology, right? And
exactly.
they just need their boss. So
Yeah.
that's a common issue and a common problem. So you're not alone. And kudos for course correction. That's awesome. That's awesome. My last question is, how can people find you? So people are listening and they're thinking, wow, I need exactly this. How do they connect?
The easiest way to connect with us is to go to our website. We just actually changed it, so it should be www.prestamoscdfi.org.
Okay.
And there's a button right at the top that says Get Empowered. So we call everything that we do our empowerment services. You go on there. It's a very quick form that you fill out. You'll put your business name, phone number, email, address, whether you would prefer to speak in English or Spanish. If you've ever been a client before, and then there's a little box at the bottom that asks how you were referred. So if you heard this today, say, I heard Amber on the podcast, or you could put notes in there about anything you might need in specific. And once you hit submit, it actually takes you to an appointment page where you can set up your intake. So our first step is we do an intake process where we ask you about your business, learn about what you're trying to do, what your goals are. And
Mhm.
then you get assigned to a business advisor who will be your main point of contact that you'll work with. And you'll get that appointment set right there. So it's a very easy process. There's not a ton of paperwork to fill out. We will ask different questions about some demographic information because we do have to report that to our funders. The majority of our programming is grant funded. So they do always want to know, what's the gender, if there's socioeconomic, and then also we like to get a baseline for where the business is at, so that later on down the road we can track and say, they've had increase in their gross sales, or X, Y, and Z has happened to kind of report those outcomes. But very easy process, and like I said, everything is English, Spanish bilingual, so very easy to access. And then we also do provide translator services. So if it's someone who prefers to speak another language, we can facilitate that both through Zoom and phone call as well.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to have our podcast director put the website link in the notes so that'll be easy access. But Amber, thank you for your time today, and also just amazing content. And I'm looking forward to part 2 and part 3.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me and the opportunity to talk about my favorite subject.
Awesome.
Brightworks Consulting hosts this podcast and YouTube channel to spotlight the leadership around the world that is changing lives. Brightworks offers a myriad of consulting services in the public and private sector, to include diversity, equity, and inclusion solutions for any size company. You can find us at www.brightworksconsulting.com. We're honored to have Best Companies AZ as a presenting sponsor for this podcast. Best Companies AZ is your #1 source for regional employer branding. You can find them at www.bestcompaniesaz.com.